Hello and welcome to the Eyes of Old Gaming channel. If you're a returning viewer, you know the drill, but for anyone new to the channel, I do reviews a little bit different than other channels, basically staying as objective as possible and story spoiler free throughout, even for older games, as the reviews are done from the perspective that you're a first-time player trying to decide if it's worth picking up now. Other than that, I also don't give out any number ratings as I find them pointless. People like what they like, and assigning number ratings serve no purpose when looking at subjective material like video games. Now, if you are interested in a more opinion-based discussion, stay to the end of the video as I give my own assessment on whether I liked it or not, and I'll also let you know if I would recommend picking it up for a first-time player today. I also like to remove the nostalgia glasses that most people talking about older games will have, and so the recommendation is based on how well the game holds up today, regardless of when it was released. Were you craving an old school style horror game? Well, luckily for you, today's game is The Evil Within, a game that released in 2014, being published by Bethesda and developed by Tango Gameworks. So what is The Evil Within, and how has it held up over the years for a first-time player to pick up today? Well, sit back and relax as we go over the game in order to answer the most important question asked in this review series. Is this one worth it for you? Let's get into it. So the game begins in the fictional Crimson City, where the player takes on the role of a detective, Sebastian Castellanos. In the beginning sequence of the game, the player will be sent to Beacon Mental Hospital, along with Sebastian's partner, Joseph Oda, and another detective, Julie Kidman, as they are responding to an emergency call regarding the hospital. Once there, a scene of chaos and carnage will be revealed to the player, as well as being confronted with the mystery of what actually happened. Shortly after this, Sebastian and his colleagues will somehow be transported into a nightmarish world, which in some instances will be comprised of a hellish fantasy, whereas at other times may resemble corrupted versions of the real world Sebastian lives in. The Evil Within is listed as a survival horror game. It's set in third person and will be a story-driven experience set on the rails. The game is separated into chapters which the player must complete in order to progress. At the end of each chapter, you go to a chapter clear screen, giving a definite separation between the chapters. Many times, this separation will allow for the game to reset the pacing at the beginning of each new chapter. Typically, the chapter zones are going to allow for some exploration and require the player to complete some objectives or solve simple puzzles to unlock the way forward. The game gives you melee and firearms to deal with enemies. However, I personally found the melee to be really quite weak, and generally I tended to avoid it. It seemed to me that the intention of the use of melee is simply to give you some space if you start getting overwhelmed, but not really an effective means of dispatching enemies. Saving the game is done at safe house locations, which in-game will be presented essentially as portals throughout chapter zones. As you play through, there are multiple things to find in chapter zones, such as collectibles, weapons, and a green gel that is used as a thematic experience point level progression system in order to upgrade abilities. Your ability upgrades are going to be really quite orthodox, such as upgrading total health or stamina for sprinting, or the ability to carry more of a specific ammunition, or improving the damage of a weapon. I found the graphics overall to be quite good, especially considering the age of the game. NPCs and the player's character model all look good, and nothing jumps out of place or feels very rough. Environments are going to range from strange reality to dark to disturbing, with both classical horror and grotesque horror settings. Really, for a game like this, I found the variety of environments and zones to be a very welcome surprise. This one feels like a very classic horror game. Nothing really too experimental gameplay-wise, and the uniqueness comes more from the story and style of the game. In terms of story, it felt unique and interesting, and does take the player in places that they may not have experienced before. There's a healthy amount of twists to keep you playing and guessing as to what is really going on, and should help to keep you hooked throughout. Personally, I found that it takes a bit to get going, but once you get through the first couple of chapters, the story continues to get deeper and pull the player in. When I said uniqueness in terms of style, that is expressed in the way the game takes you to multiple different locations with their own feel. Sometimes dark and eerie, sometimes grotesque, and sometimes feeling absurd. It's interesting that the game even manages to include horror trope locations, such as a medieval-esque area, complete with the expected graveyards, and yet can simultaneously keep you firmly in the modern world. I found the sound to be quite good in this one. Nothing standing out for being poor quality. Dialogue is good and well written, and effects all have a high quality. Music is interesting and plays a role throughout the game as well, such as the locations that allow you to reach the safe zone having a particular song playing. Sometimes when in tense locations, it can really feel like a beacon in the darkness, giving you a sigh of relief that safety is near. I'll play some examples here so that you can decide for yourself on the sound.
Is this what it was like, Seb? After the accident?
Well, I never put a gun to my head.
No, of course not. Just quietly sank into a bottle.
We can't all be perfect.
There's no time for fooling around.
So what games can we compare to? Well, looking at games I've covered on the channel, we can see some minor similarity to Call of Cthulhu, mostly just for the story-driven horror experience. Definitely we have some major differences, with The Evil Within being a much more combat-focused game, but still I think it's worth mentioning as a story-driven dark experience. Another one covered on the channel is Outlast. This one I mentioned more for the environments, as there seems to be some crossover between these two. The big difference is coming from the fact that Outlast really doesn't give you an option to fight back, whereas The Evil Within is going to have many combat-focused sequences. I also had some vibes of the Dead Space games. This one felt quite similar in terms of actual gameplay, though obviously the weapons are going to feel different, as The Evil Within is built around more conventional weapons, with the Dead Space franchise obviously having a more sci-fi style. The use of cramped environments to add to the horror, need for combat, and story-driven style, and separation of the game into chapters all came together to make these ones feel very similar. By far the most similar experience has to be Resident Evil. These two really feel like sister games, and even the director of The Evil Within is the creator of the Resident Evil franchise. If you enjoy Resident Evil games, I can safely say this one will be a very similar experience for you. So now that we've looked at some of the features of the game, we reach the point of my review where I give a more subjective look at my personal experience with it. Please keep in mind that the following is just my opinion of the game, and if the features and genre seem interesting to you, you should definitely check it out for yourself, as not all games are for all gamers. The game that you hate might be the next gamer's all-time favorite, which is one of the things that I love about gaming. There's always something for someone out there. So did I enjoy The Evil Within, and do I recommend picking it up for the first time player?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, and a resounding yes if you enjoy horror games, and especially games in the Resident Evil style. Previously, I've reviewed Outlast on the channel, and although I thought the game did a lot right in terms of horror, it really isn't my style. I don't like feeling completely helpless in a game, even if it is a horror game, and The Evil Within manages to give that great horror feeling, while still offering a good combat-focused game. I played through the DLCs as well, and felt they really added to the overall story and were a great addition. I'm also considering uploading a similar style of review for the DLCs as well in the future. The story in this title is unique, and a good departure from the now standard approach of offering games that are solely focused on graphics and giant worlds, while sacrificing story elements. I recommend this one to anyone who is a fan of horror games or the horror genre, and especially to players who have played and enjoy Resident Evil games. If you like those, I'm very convinced that this will also be an enjoyable experience. The fact that this is just an old school style game that still holds up today, not being too clunky or having graphics that feel super dated, made it a refreshing playthrough for me. So I hope you enjoyed this look at The Evil Within. Have you already played through this one? What were your own thoughts on the game? Did you agree or disagree with my own assessment of it? If you disagreed, let me know why. Maybe there's something I didn't think of and you can convince me. I'd love to hear about your own experiences down in the comments, or if my review showcase was helpful, I'd like to know if you decided to go ahead with it or not. Either way, if you found this video interesting or entertaining, please let me know with a thumbs up, and also consider subscribing to the channel. I make and upload a variety of gaming content, not just reviews like this, but also walkthroughs, mod showcases, let's play, and more. And I'd love to have you join the community and help direct the future of the channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to watch today, and until next time, take care.